Hey, good morning, everybody. Working on a cover today. This is for the After Realm number 3. And all I can say is this cover's based on a page or a set of panels within the book. I kind of like the idea that those old... Marvel didn't just do it. A bunch of different companies did it where they would recreate the cover from basically one of the panels or a full page or something like that. So I wanted to do something like that. So this isn't exactly how it unfolds in the comic, but yeah, that's what it's based on. And solicitations for images due soon for this, so I did the sketch sort of based on taking the panels and reworking them. And I did that all digitally, so I can't really show you right here what I did with the raw files and stuff, but they were just smaller panels. It'll be fun to sort of revisit that in the future. Say, after the issue comes out. I was going to rule out these, rule out the borders, but I'm going to just do it by hand. I'm also considering whether or not I want to cut this off up here for the logo, but I think I'll just have it just go straight up the page, and I can, at a later date, when I color the cover and put the logo on and such, I'll be able to, and I'll lay down the logo and all that stuff. But for now, I'm just gonna treat this like this. So I'm just gonna freehand this. I wish I could keep this all in one shot for you. Let's try this. Just for a second. I'm not going to be able to catch this all in one shot. But I'm also not trying to make this line like the straightest thing ever. I want it to look hand-drawn. You know, the difference between using a ruler and not using a ruler is an effect. What's the effect that you want to have? And for me, when I do a ruler, I mean, obviously it expresses a certain amount of technology, a certain amount of precision that you get in a real current world or a future world. But I find a lot of times for fantasy, what works best for me is using hand-drawn lines as opposed to using a ruler, even on swords and stuff. Unless that sword's supposed to be magical, in which case a straight line with a ruler will give it a different feel from the other weapons that you've drawn freehand. Time-wise, I'll say for the first 2 issues of After Realm, I did a lot of panels with rulers, but that had a lot to do more with the process that I was working on with those first 2 issues, which was a lot of cut and paste because it was in a different format, and moving it from one format to another and just hand drawing and redrawing all those panel borders didn't really make sense. So I used rulers, well, not even really rulers, but you know, like I just did it in Photoshop, a straight line. So it's not my preference all the time, but sometimes you do things out of necessity. Did a nice little interview last night with John Suntress of Word Balloon podcast. It's probably the best comic book podcast out there. And I could say that with confidence. Not just because I've been on it, but it just is. It's like, it's the main podcast as far as I'm concerned. There's other great ones, really, really good ones. But I think John's is the best. Anyway, I was on there last night talking about Afterrealm and Powers. Taki jumped in, which was a nice surprise. She hung out with us for quite a while. I also did some drawing while I did the interview. I'll post all that later at another point. In fact, I'll definitely make sure to post a link below to that interview. It's a nice rainy day here in Washington State, just outside of Portland. I'm going to try to enjoy this because the summer is coming and the heat is coming with it. And that's no fun. Especially in this house. Okay. Let's get into the nitty gritty. So basically we're looking at Una is like looking down at this giant fly creature rising up out of the ground. I decided that she's going to be mostly in silhouette, aside for some minor details. Like her cape and her hair will be color. And I'm thinking, the only thing color-wise I'm thinking at this point is that in the foreground, despite her having red hair, she's going to be done in cooler colors, cooler tones. And the background with the fly is going to be in warmer tones. So that's all I'm thinking about right now as far as separation of foreground, background when it comes to colors. And I'm carefully trying to express here in the shape of the head and the ears and the outline of the body that she's looking down in this first panel. It's all about like the shape of the head and the ears. Hopefully these little details really sell her looking down. She's got a sword in that hand. I was gonna do all of this with a pen, but knowing that, with a brush, but knowing that most of this is gonna be in silhouette, I'm gonna switch over to pen because I get an angle, a little sharper corners than I can comfortably get with a brush. So I'm guessing that most of you are familiar with this blue line printout that artists will sometimes do. So because this was scanned in from some Photoshop stuff, I think I originally did this in blue line, which I don't do as often anymore, because I was going to ink this possibly on John Suntress's interview podcast. but I decided against it only because it's a little more thought intensive. And like the sketch that I did during the show was still sketchy, I was happy with it, but I was definitely, like, the face is a little inked, a little wonky, because I wasn't super concentrating as I'm talking during an interview. Oh, some smudge. I forget what my point was. So I think it was a plan to possibly work on this piece, but ultimately I didn't. I worked on something else. Yeah, I think that figure's done. All right, so go to the second figure, Una. And I like this old trick too of 3 static panels with change happening. So it's fun to show how there's time passing in a comic in between these panels like this. I remember what I said about her head, so I'm going to see that she is lifting her head a little higher in this panel, because she's looking up at this fly as it's rising up out of the ground. Yeah, I think that helps. Then, like I said, I'm gonna go back to pen with this so that I can help punch up the edges here a little bit, these corners, just a little more sharpness. See the difference between the line here and the line there? It's very subtle. It's just more angle, which gives it just a little bit more energy, a little bit more of a punch. She has her scabbard on this side. I'm not sure if I want to draw it or not. I mean, she's always supposed to have a scabbard. If you have a sword, you have to put it in something, right? But it's up to you, Does it always need to be in the shot? It's not TV after all. And now that this creature fly thing is rising up, the ground also changes with it. There we go. It's coming along nicely. I'm happy so far. Black, this is black. And as I'm inking the foreground, I'm thinking a bit about the background. Since I'm not doing this, digitally, usually when I do it digitally, I'll just draw him on another layer, and then I can change around the opacity, which I could still do when I scan it in. But, you know, I just think a little bit differently when I'm inking traditionally like this. So thinking about if I want to use thin lines or thick lines, or just keep all the thin lines in front of her and then the thicker lines in the back, I'll kind of figure it out. One moment. I'm back. I had to kick the cat out. Drinking from my Hellboy mug. Yeah, don't you amateurs try holding coffee over your artwork cover. You have to be professional and pull that stupidity off. All right, let's see. What is this line here? Maybe I was trying to bring the shoulder out more. There we go. Yeah, I'll make that black too. Alrighty. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit here for you. Let's get a little closer. This third figure. All right, now she's looking up. I'm going to bring her ears back a little bit more. And that kind of accentuates her head is lifted. There we go. Oh, I see when I copied and pasted her, I didn't change her hair any, so I have to keep that in mind. I want to make sure I move her hair around so that it's different from panel to panel. Even though if I just traced it the way, inked it, the way I drew it in this other panel, the minute differences in the brush lines, my hand shaking, that sort of thing, would still give it its own sort of life. But I want to make sure I put the effort in to really make it different. So here's a fun trick with capes. A lot of times what I do when I draw a cape, furling, unfurling in the wind or something like this, is I draw the end shape first. This is where the shape of the cape ends. And then what I do is I'll then trace that back to the front of the cape, you know, through sketches and stuff, and then picking out what I think are the best forms that really express the shape of this cape. I wish I spent more time. It's not like it's too late, but I wish I would spend more time studying fabrics a little bit more. Like the pinch marks. Dave Johnson does a great job with doing these abstract but very realistic wrinkles and clothes and capes and stuff. I say abstract only because they're so stylized, you know, that they're cooler than real folds are. One of the reasons I love talking about art process is you end up saying weird things like, what did I just say about folds being real or real folds? Like, what other conversation are you gonna have a phrase like real folds or abstract folds? Alrighty. Back to these straighter lines. I learned to draw this vague shape of a hand. You know, you give like a little bit of a clue of the knuckle, a little bit of clue of the thumb, a little bit of clue of the palm. I actually learned this through looking at Bill Sienkiewicz's work. Growing up, I was a big fan of the New Mutants. And even though Bill's style and my style aren't similar at all, he was an influence on me. Especially his New Mutant stuff. And I think it was a cover for an X-Men collection of Dark Phoenix, where he did some shapes like that. It was sort of the first time I saw that you can do these hands and sort of these shapes. I am drawing the scabbard, evidently. You know, I do know, we both know how to draw hands, you know, in a regular kind of way, but in comics there are certain things that you find that you draw represented, not literal. And maybe because there's so many clenched fists with knuckles in comics that, you know, it makes sense to kind of come up with your own shorthand for a hand. I should have done the sword digitally because it's going to be hard to sort of recreate this exact form and shape. So I'm going to try a little bit here. I'm going to let the sword move around a little bit. I just need some straight lines here to help me out. That's it. I also should use a thinner pen for this, but since I already did that here, I'm going to just allow it to be consistent. There we go. Wait. Boy, I kind of messed up the hand a little, like where her thumb is or should be, but luckily because it's mostly shape, not like a literally drawn hand and it's small, I can get away with, you know, I originally started drawing the thumb at the top here, but it really would be at the bottom, you know, be something like that. Now I'm going to have to be really careful because the way I colored that in, that's going to take forever to dry. Alright, I think it's pretty good. That is basically the foreground. I'm tempted to do some more rendering in here. I'm just not sure if I want to. sometimes it's hard to explain why. It's not a matter of like energy or time or effort. I've been trying to peel back my work as opposed to adding to it too much. So sometimes it's kind of hard to look at something, go, oh yeah, you know, this is done. It maybe just needs more weight up in here. So that means like adding some shadows. Yeah, I bet that would be good. That's kind of what it's missing. So it's not rendering, it's not lines, it's weight that it's missing. There you go. That'll look better. I'm gonna fill in one of these figures here just to give you a better idea how this will look when it's finished. Because I typically don't fill in all my blacks when I'm doing an original piece, unless it's a commission. Reason for that is, as you'll see, it's time consuming for what is basically a finished drawing that I'm going to scan in. And, yeah, I still have the color and such. So typically on my originals, the blacks aren't filled in. And then what I'll do is when I have a break in the schedule, or I'll just grab like a lap board and stuff and sit in front of the TV and fill in some black. But as you can see, it's going to take me as long to fill in the black area here as it took to draw her whole figure, or to ink in her whole figure. Oh wait, that doesn't make any sense. Fuck. Yeah, her sword should be in front of this thing, not behind it. I'm gonna leave it like that for now. Maybe I'll actually use weight out on here, something I almost never ever do. But I think in this case, that's not one of those things I can fix with a shadow or creating something else. I mean, sure, you could say this big chunk landed like in front of, behind her, and maybe I can put some other chunks here in front of her cape to indicate that the ground that's being lifted is shifting all around her, not just in front of her. I'm not sure if that would add to depth or actually take away from it. It's hard to say. You see why I fill in my black digitally instead of doing this every single time? I know a lot of artists will, you know, it's kind of their favorite part is giving that love and care and finishing the details. But I'm definitely task oriented. I'm about my deadlines, getting the work done. I don't know if I could ever relax to the point where I can just take all the time I want on something. You know, some artists, a lot of artists, most artists are kind of like that. They really want to take time to indulge. But I'm about kind of like the overall process, I guess. Like I'm excited about the next thing I'm going to draw. The next challenge, next chance to get it right. So maybe that's why I prefer to keep moving. Like even if I somehow became independently wealthy, that doesn't mean I take 3 years or whatever to do a project and, you know, really milk it or take the time to perfection. Because for me, I think perfection creates a level of stagnicity. I don't know if that's a word. But, you know, it kills a certain amount of spontaneity, happy mistakes. Sometimes I'll lay down a line that doesn't necessarily make sense, but it feels right. You just allow it to be. Sometimes even if it's a tangent, you're supposed to avoid tangents, line tangents, where a line runs into another object. Like if this cape was to rest up right against this line, it's called a tangent because you're going off from this shape and into this other shape. And typically you want to avoid that. But sometimes a tangent can be your friend if it's done right. And you're not going to do it right if you're doing it on purpose. If that makes any sense, at least for me. I can make those kind of accidental tangents happen only through an accident. If I think about it or try too hard, then something doesn't quite work. The effect isn't the same. Now I have other brushes. I could grab a thicker brush, and fill this out quicker, but that would require filling out, opening up an ink bottle and then clearing out the brush afterwards and stuff. So this is a little impractical, but I just don't feel like breaking out another thing and then having to clean it. Not for this little spot. All right. I feel there should be a fold in here too. Thick, thin. Yeah, I think that worked out. What do you think? All right, let's look at the sword again. And I fucked up. This time I'm going to use a ruler just because it's in black and it's just harder to see. And then I'll try to fix this. We'll see how it looks. With some weight out there. I'm not going to be happy about that. I mean, the more I think about it, I might just end up blacking it out rather than put weight on in there. That way the original, it'll have something different from the scan, when I scan it in and ink it. Sometimes we'll see, like you don't need to make a choice right then and there. All right, this is gonna be fun. I'm gonna ink in the fly. This fly is a lot of fun to draw because it's just so ugly, weird, and abstract. For the sake of time, I'm just gonna record inking this larger figure here. And then maybe these. We'll see. We'll see if I have enough time. It's not just time with you guys, but at a certain point I have to break for lunch and all that kind of crap. So I'm thinking right now about if I want to use a pen or a brush on this. I think I want to use a pen because he's this monster creature, and so I want the line work to have a certain rough line to it, Let me see if I can get in a little closer. How's that? No? I think that's closer. So we're getting closer also to the end of this Kickstarter. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not too sure if we're going to make it. You know, the pandemic, when we launched it, the pandemic thing was just really starting to happen, and I knew it was a chance. But I also feel like we have to keep going forward with our plans, because what other choice do we have? There's so many unknowns to things right now. If we err too much on the side of caution, and I'm a cautious dude, could end up, just not doing anything or waiting too long. So anyway, I decided to go ahead and launch the Kickstarter, even knowing people are going to be tight with their money. And there's other challenges with my particular approach. I tend to do things, quote, my way as opposed to the correct way. And, Kickstarter is not necessarily intended to be paired up with a simultaneous publishing, But as I've explained before, I have a fan base that I've built in the direct market, and I know, like, no matter how much tweeting I do about it, there are people who are going to miss that I'm doing this project on Kickstarter. So I wanted to do it with Kickstarter and Image, and they've been amazing at helping us out with all this stuff, all the Kickstarter stuff. But it does also, while it combines my audience, it sort of splits it a little bit as well. Because if you go to a store, you're going to get it from a store, then it's not a problem to just wait and get it with your other comics, Not everybody needs that same personal experience that many of you are enjoying through the Kickstarter. So just get it through the store. But, that was a risk, I think, that made lots of sense when there wasn't a pandemic. Then the sort of third risk was doing it as a series versus like a graphic novel or a one-shot kind of deal,
I'm listening.
Of course you are. It's my Alexa spying on me. She literally just said, "I'm listening."
No, I'm not spying on you. I value your privacy.
Oh my God. Wasn't there an episode of Succession that was just like this? Anyway, the other kind of risk I was taking was just doing this as a series, because it's hard to maintain that momentum and excitement, I think, issue to issue. So I knew that was going to be a risk and challenge as well. And that's not to say that, like, if we don't make it, it doesn't mean I'm going to give up on the Kickstarter. It's just these are just weird circumstances, man. I can just as well make it too. Like, we can just as easily actually sustain this Kickstarter. We can totally meet the goal. But if we don't, I won't be surprised. I won't even be upset. Like I said, these are circumstances, man, beyond our control. And if we don't make it, I'll talk to you guys about, like, well, what should we do? Should we wait to do another Kickstarter for, like, a collection to coincide, or what? I don't know. And also with the state of the health of the direct market, even if Kickstarter didn't really work out with this time, I might just come back and do it all over again, because I don't know exactly what's going to happen in the direct market either. None of us knows what's going on. It's crazy. But, fear not, this is, like I said, fuck. This is why I work digitally mostly now. Like, the fucking smears, even with the glove, it'll happen. Anyway, this is a passion project. This is something I'm doing almost just for myself. Like, I'm making a lot of choices in here that just don't make sense for anybody other than me and my own sense of imagination. So I absolutely love this, and we'll be doing it one way or the other. I mean, I even decided, like, ultimately, like, if either I can't find an audience or because of the disruptions and all the crazy, if I have to just do it as a webcomic for free, just put up my own site or whatever, then I will. That's what a passion project is. You're doing it for yourself. Now, making a living on it, that's much better. That's the dream. But we'll see. Hopefully most of this will come off with an eraser. We'll see. That's kind of neat like that. I mean, I got to do like the crisscrossy stuff on his face too. This is such a weird design, but I was really happy with it. And this fly creature is very Georgia O'Keeffe. It's not intentional. There's a lot of unintentional, subconscious sexual energy in my work. A lot of phallic symbols, vaginal stuff. I'm not doing it to be cheeky. It's just, I don't know, it's part of my aesthetic. Which is weird because I don't consider my actual artwork like really erotic or anything, you know? Like, I don't do a lot of nudie stuff, or, you know, most of the stuff that you'll see is going to be in powers. It's going to be for like a story reason, you know, or Murder Inc. But, you know, generally you don't see me drawing just naked ladies for no reason. Or just for fun or whatever. So it's weird that, yeah, there's a lot of this other sort of imagery keeps popping up in my work. And even though this is all ages, I don't consider any of that stuff detrimental, or it's not so overt that it's going to, you know, trick somebody into some sort of imagery that they don't want. It's not that obvious. I wouldn't do that. But I also remember as a kid, like a prepubescent kid, watching movies and stuff that had this sort of underlying sexual images subliminally and stuff, and knowing it meant something but not knowing or understanding what it was. But it still sort of affected me, and I guess maybe it was about like the mystery of the larger world and stuff. Kind of hard to explain, but it's always been there. And I think it's been in a lot of literature and stuff. It certainly exists in the subtext of like Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz and the others. You know, Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland have had pretty big influence on me. Even though I've never read any of the original materials for those things. Obviously the movies and the illustrations from Alice in Wonderland. Why do I keep saying Wonderland? Wonderland have affected me pretty deeply. You could definitely see the influence of the iconography in a lot of my work, you know. When I draw fantasy stories or write fantasy stories, I tend to write young girl characters, typically with a traveling partner of some sort. So there's elements of that in both Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland. And those motifs keep coming up in my work. And also, I think I've expressed this before, which is that I had a messed up childhood. And it's hard for me to fantasize and to draw young kid stuff or kids without sort of a certain amount of corruption to the innocence, unless it's a girl character, because I grew up as a boy. And so when I think of more fun and innocent things, it's hard for me to do that with boy characters because I associate my childhood with, stuff. So often in these scenarios, I end up creating a girl character with a sidekick because it puts more distance between me and the childhood stuff and makes it a little easier. At least I think that's what's going on in my head. So I'm going to do something fun here, which is sometimes, and I did this mostly in Mice Templar, I would fill my black like this and leave these little teeny white lines, which would give a sense of not just texture, but direction of the form. There we go. Now the reason I'm turning this upside down to do the same thing on this side is my make sure it's dry. Because I'm right-handed, I'm making form and shape lines this way easier than this way. There's going to be like a little bump in it this way. It's not quite as smooth, so I want to go in the direction that this is all expressing. Sometimes when I'm drawing and talking, I'm speaking from like far in the back of my brain. So I'm not exactly sure what I'm saying or if it's coming out right. And I don't exactly rewatch my own videos afterwards. So hopefully all of what I'm saying is making sense. And last night when I was talking with John Suntress on the Word Balloon podcast, I had a small explosion from the mouth. At one point we were talking about the president and, I try and keep my politics just completely free of my comics work because I'm not a political writer or figure, you know what I mean? I don't have any, son of a bitch. I don't have any, original political thoughts or anything. We're just talking about the president and I just like blurted out my frustrations all at once and, I don't know, I usually just don't do that. But, because I was drawing as I was talking or whatever, it just came out pretty raw. And like I said, most of us we're just trying to escape the realities of the world. And that's why I don't really engage in the political talk and stuff. It's not that I don't have opinions. It's not that I don't want to express them. But I think I'm serving people better, even if they agree with me. just by being an artist and just delivering my particular vision of stuff. And I'm sure even without me saying stuff, you can figure it out through my posts and the things that I like and the things that I promote, where my stances are, so you don't need me preaching to you about anything either. Kind of happy with this eye. Not totally, though. But I guess with the more open lines up here, it's going to allow me in color to help create more depth. You know, because with color, I can put little shapes and depth into the little lens things and stuff. I think what I originally intended to do was to ink it in a tighter line. Let me show you something. So I did this last night with John Centris, and I inked the fly eyes like this, and I was really happy with the way it turned out. Maybe even digitally I'll still do it here. I don't know. I can play around with it. His face got a little sloppy on here, but it's because I can't, you know, when I'm inking live, I'm not giving it my full attention, and my face isn't like right up in it because I'm on camera. All right, back to the eyeballs. I don't know. I'll see how I feel after I scan all this in, if I want to rework his eyeballs or not. I'm not too sure. I do want to get much tighter detail. I don't know what I do with that pen. I'll use this pen. In the mouth here. Oh man, that's gonna take forever to dry. This particular, I love this pen, but it can take a while to dry. This is the Furukochi pen. Furukochi pen. Anyway. All right, I think it's mostly done. I'm gonna put in some extra rendering lines here with my brush. So this house is looking, I think this is gonna be pretty fun when it comes together. So, putting these thicker rendering lines, just describing the shape of the figure. Add some to it. This will make a little more sense when there's like shading. Oops. Make sure I'm in shot, right? gonna take a while to dry. I'm just gonna leave it. Trying to decide if this is kind of done. I don't know. Feels unfinished. Let's keep going and see what happens. I mean, I'm basically done. Now I'm not going, yeah, I'm going to sign off in a second here because I figured, you know, you've already seen me draw or ink this fly here. You don't need to bother seeing it here and here. And there's a map that's going to be drawn in here. But I think this is probably long enough. I'm sure you're bored of me. I'm bored of me. All right, guys. Well, thanks for hanging in here. I hope you appreciate everything that you've got in life, because, you know, hard times will make you do that. Alrighty. Take care, guys.